So my first question, as I said, everybody knows you're a football agent. You're now a football agent in the UK, but you're living in Israel. So we'd like to know a little bit about your work as a football agent and your connections to Scotland, where I think you've placed at least 4 players, and you've got one playing just now for St Mirren.
Well, funny enough, the one playing to St Mirren, just a bit of breaking news on that, is actually likely to go back to Israel for the second half of the season for a variety of reasons.
Okay.
That's occurred over the last day or two for a variety of reasons. We're just literally dealing with that today and tomorrow. But yeah, there's been various Israelis over the time to try and keep it brief, because I don't think people obviously want to hear too much about football. The first one was Jan Telesnikov in 1999, who was signed by Paul Sturrock at Dundee United. If there's anyone from Dundee on the Zoom. Hold on, we seem to have someone from Dundee.
Yeah, Chris is saying he's from there, so that's good.
Okay. Well, I must actually, Chris, because there's someone, I don't want to get too distracted with the football, because probably we want to talk more about what's happening here in Sderot, that when I moved this player to Dundee United in 1999, I managed to get a phone number for what I thought was a representative of the Jewish community, rang through to this lovely old lady in Dundee. And when I said I'm trying to get hold of the Jewish community in Dundee, she told me I was talking to it.
That's right. That would be about right, yes.
But anyway, that was in 1999. In about 2008, I think Gil Blumenstein joined Terry Butcher at Inverness Caledonian Thistles. Now I'm going to guess there's no one from Inverness on this Zoom, but again, I'm happy to be proven wrong.
No, there could be. If Gina's on the Zoom, she's from Inverness.
So anyway, that was in about 2008. Okay, let's try another city then. During the Corona pandemic, I took a player who I believe joined us on the Zoom last time, Guy Malamed, who joined in Johnston, obviously. So if there's anyone from Perth here on the Zoom, that would be them. And as you pointed out, in 2023 in the summer, I took a young Israeli striker to St Mirren. If there's anyone from Paisley on the Zoom, by the name of Stav Nahmani, who, as I say, is literally for a variety of reasons. He's going to head back to Israel for the second half of the season this week, and then we will see again. He might well come back to Scotland. We'll have to see.
So let me move you on then, so you don't have to think, Clive. The next question is really, you were obviously such a busy guy in the UK. So what made you move to Israel? The first time, not the second time.
The first time, what was the first time? The first time was, well, just after university. It's what a lot of me and my friends did. In fact, my 2 best friends from Liverpool University, we all probably made Aliyah around about the same time. They still live here now. One of them in Benjamin, one of them in Beit Shemesh. We were sort of 3 best friends together in uni. I must say, very sadly, that one of them, the one in Beit Shemesh, his son was in the paratroopers, and his son was killed in Gaza about 6 weeks ago.
Oh dear.
That was very tough to go to that funeral. Very, very tough. So sorry to interrupt myself. Edward, if you can hear me, is there any chance one of you could send the Zoom link to my WhatsApp? Because I need to pass it on to someone who lives here in Sderot who might also...
I'll do it, Clive. I'll do it.
You tell me. So, so anyway, that's what made me move to Israel. And obviously I was in the army. That was between 95 to 97. I was a lone soldier, which just meant I got paid more than other people, basically. And then I moved back to England in 2000, and then obviously made very regular trips over to Israel in all those 22 years. And as you pointed out, did a little bit of business in Israel, and then came back to live here in May 2022.
Okay, so obviously you've ended up in Sderot. I've prepared a little graphic that maybe Edwin can put up, because not everybody knows exactly where Sderot is. And can you tell us a little bit about why you ended up in Sderot? Edward, there's a few people in the waiting room trying to get in.
קודם כל לשלוח את הזה, ואחרי זה תתקשר לינק. Okay, so why did I end up in Sderot? That would be because of my wife, basically. And you're asking me to explain to you a little bit about the geography of Sderot, is that right, Sammy?
Well, we've put up a map for people
Okay.
to see, so they'll be able to see the Gaza Strip in yellow on the map, and Sderot is at the top right-hand corner. So maybe you can say a little bit about the area of Sderot and its proximity to Gaza and why it usually suffers from rockets from Gaza.
Okay, so Sderot is obviously the nearest part of Sderot to the nearest part of Gaza is about 1 kilometer. We live on that side of Gaza, me and my wife, so we're probably 1 kilometer from Gaza. And also, of course, it's the biggest. It's the biggest town around Gaza. It's got a population now of 36,000. So even though obviously, as you know, there's a lot of kibbutzim, etc., on the Gaza border, they have much smaller populations. That's why Sderot tends to be the target for the rockets, because it's where there's the largest number of people.
Okay, if you can go back to maybe the 7th of October and the impact on that whole area of the kibbutzim around Gaza and what happened on the day, and then of course what happened in Sderot.
Okay, so let me sorry, one second, sorry. The 7th of October was obviously Simchat Torah, as you know. Sderot is there's a lot of religious people in Sderot. There's a lot of very traditional people in Sderot. And to be honest with you, the thing about Simchat Torah, as you know, even if you're not religious in the slightest, is a very fun day. It's for the kids. You take the kids to shul. They get sweets. So it's a day that everyone would be involved with. We actually went to shul on a Friday night. So we went to bed and it was a normal day. Now, Sammy, I've got a feeling you might have someone who's trying to get in who's going to be able to help us a little bit in what we're talking about, Sammy. I think you should have someone trying to join us by the name of Elad.
Everybody that's waiting is in at the moment.
Okay.
There's nobody waiting at the moment.
Okay. If you can find someone called Elad who should be with us, Edward.
Is that Budana?
Yes.
Yes. So I've seen his name, Budana Elad. He's on.
Yes. If you could maybe unmute him, Sammy, would be great.
Okay.
If he's there somewhere.
He will need to unmute himself as well.
Elad, אתה שומע?
Yeah, here everyone. Good evening, everyone.
Okay, so Sammy, I didn't want to make any promises because these things are difficult to arrange, but Elad is actually a policeman in Sderot who speaks fantastic English, far better than me, I've got to say. And Elad was obviously very involved in the events of the 7th of October, including obviously the things on the 2 videos. And in fact, the reason I met Elad is because, as we've discussed, I've been helping the municipality with the British visitors that have been coming and American visitors. And normally I have to translate for the policemen. And as I say, I turned up to translate for Elad, who wanted to explain to them the events of the 7th of October, to only find out that his English was at least as good as mine, if not better. So I spoke to Elad today, Sammy, and he is actually on duty now, but he's trying to take a little bit of a break. So if it's okay, Sammy, if we can do the videos rather than me telling you what happens, we can have a wonderful opportunity for one of the people that was very heroic on the day to actually explain to everyone what happened, which I just thought might be even better than me explaining.
Okay, so I'm hoping that Edward will play the two videos. I'm having a problem finding the third one at the moment.
Okay, don't worry about the third one. The third one is connected to something else.
Okay. So, Edward, if you can play the two videos, but the longer one, apparently the first one will not have any sound, so don't think there's anything wrong with your phone or with your laptop when Edward plays it, and then we'll play the second one, and then we'll go back to Clive.
Okay, so well, I think what Elad is going to do, Elad is going to talk you through what you're going to see here. Elad, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Clive. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Good evening.
Because the video has already started, so I start to talk about the event of the 7th of October, and after that, I will introduce myself. From your left side, you can see the white vehicle. Oh, you take it back? Okay. So let me introduce myself. Good evening, everyone. My name is Elad Boadana. I'm 34 years old. I grew up all my life in Sderot. This is my home city. Glad to be in this evening. Thank you to Clive and thank you to all to listening to me this night. I saw about the lights. I don't know. I cannot turn on the video camera. I don't know what you see, if you see me or you see the vehicle. But we have a small event over here, and all the police are outside looking for someone who got lost over here in the wood. So it will be short today. If we speak about the event of the 7th of October, you can see the white truck come into the police station. That's the right building that you see at the right. If someone can try to account the terrorists that get down from the car, that will be a impossible mission, because we have already almost as 27 terrorists that come to conquer the police station, and in the end it was 28 terrorists that come to the police station. The black car that you see on the road, just arrived, his name is Adir Shlomo. He's the logistic guy that was in charge to open the war room in the station, that all the police officers will come and take the long gun with them and get out to the combat. In a few seconds, you will see an RPG that got shot on the police station, exactly to the chief of the station office. 1 second, sorry. 1 second, Clive, I'm sorry. They call me. You need me?
Can I just say, if everybody is not able to see at the top of the picture, behind all those cars, including the police cars, you'll see a number of people moving and running. I'm assuming that's what he means when he talks about the terrorists who are coming off their vehicles towards the police station. So this will be a video camera, I presume, across the road from the police station. Is that right?
Yeah, you're right. Now you see the black vehicle start to drive, but he's not driving. The driver is already killed. They take his leg from the brake and they give the car to roll down all over the hill until he gets stuck in a tree. And now you can see the black car come from the right. This is the car that the driver is an Arab Israeli guy that see a woman with 2 kids on the road after her father was killed. This is the Swissa family. I don't know if you heard the story of them, but inside this car there is 2 young girls by the age of 3 and 5, and her mother and the driver. The driver is an Arab Israeli guy in the name of Amar Abu Sabila. In the right, behind the tree, there is a white car of the police officer. His name is Shmuel Gulima. When the Arab guy see the police officer, he told him there is, now you do zoom in. In this car, there is a driver and a woman in front, and two small girls in the back. You can see the terrorists come to the car and he shot the driver and he shot the mother in front of the two children, 2 girls. And the white car that you see from your right, was the car of Shmuel Gulima, the police officer that got shot also, because there is 11 terrorists in the back side of the station. So they killed him immediately. In the red car that you see right now, unfortunately, the video is going too fast. If you can do it slower, you can see the shooting on the front, in the front of the car, how they got shot of them. This guy, his name is Meir Abergel. He had a leukemia. He was 54 years old. He had a leukemia and he's still been in service. When he got the WhatsApp call to come to the police station because the city is under attack, he didn't think twice and he come. And this is the place that he found his death, unfortunately. You can do play now. Thank you.
Can I just ask? This is obviously very early in the morning on Shabbat.
Yeah, this is the time, like 7 and 10 minutes in the morning, 7:30 max in the morning. The police station was attacked by the terrorists, and the combat ended after something like 28 hours. After that, the chief of the whole area decided to destroy the building on the terrorist. After we passed the 60 police officers that got hurt in the combat on the police station, they decide to destroy the building when the terrorist is inside of the building.
Can I just interrupt and just ask? So this
Yeah,
is obviously one scene at the police station, but there were terrorists in other parts of Sderot, and obviously people were killed in the street and people were killed in their house. But the police station was a very significant combat area because the terrorists wanted to capture the police station, which had about 30 policemen in it, and the terrorists took it over. And then, as you say, the IDF came later on, and there was a long fight of about many hours before they were able to overpower the terrorists, and then they destroyed the police station using bulldozers and killed the terrorists that were still inside. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Unfortunately, a good friend of me, one of the police officers that in my unit was found his death also in this combat. And the idea to come and to destroy, or if we will speak about the attack of the terrorists, if we think why they want to come to destroy the police station, that's a symbol. That's a symbol of power. The police officers in Israel, they are a symbol of power. So if you heard them, you heard the government, you heard how you said that.
The country.
בסמל שלטוני.
Yeah, in the symbol of the country.
A symbol, yeah, in a symbol. National symbol, yeah. That's the idea to attack the police station. Also, if you think about it, this is the only place that's supposed to be a warm weapon in the city. Where you put your weapon in the city in Israel? Only on the police station.
Okay. So what about the second video, Clive, that you have?
The police officer in Israel had a camera on them, on their body. It's called a body camera. When they were on duty, they put it. Each one of the police officers got a body camera, and this video is coming from one of the police officers that go to the black car that I speak about them, and there you can see the girls in the age of 5 and 3 after her father and mother got killed. Now they orphans. And you can see the police officer get them out from the car and take them to the safe place. At that time, we had 8 officers inside the station, locked on the roof of the station, and we can see that the police officers that come to help, they cannot get inside to the police station, and most of them got shot. Over here, there is a police officer in the name of Rami Cohen. He got 3 bullets in his stomach. And one of the police officer and the one citizen has helped him to go behind one of the cars. All the time there is fires behind their head, and bullets are not stopped to shoot on them.
I think it's a little bit difficult to see some of the video images, but I think it's important for people on this Zoom to understand that because Sderot is the biggest town nearest Gaza, it was a major target for them. And as our speaker is saying, the police station was a symbol of the state of Israel, and they wanted to capture that in order to show that they were able to overcome Israel. And there was a very long battle at the police station, and eventually the IDF and the police together were able to destroy the station and kill all the terrorists. But there were about, is that correct? About 30 officers were killed inside the police station?
8.
8.
8 was
not
dead.
terrorists,
We
police,
have
police.
some. Yeah, the police officer, 8 police officers got dead. Only in this this building. After that, we have a lot of event team in the combat, and we have another police officer who got shot and dead. But 8 inside this building, and we have some officers that get out from the roof. We bring a fire department truck, and we get them out from the roof when the terrorist was inside the building. Like I said, it was 28 hours of fighting, non-stopping fighting, all the time inside the building.
Yeah, it was a big battle. Listen, thank you so much for taking time off to join us when you're supposed to be looking after the citizens. Thank you. Nice to meet you, and maybe we can meet again. Thank you.
I will. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Clive, can you maybe now talk about the evacuation from the town and what happened after the first few days? You're on mute. Edward, can you unmute Clive? Hello. Edward, can you unmute Clive, please?
Hold on. Okay.
So if you could tell us a bit about what happened after the first few days.
Okay, let me just try and, because obviously Elad joined us, which was something he said he would do, which was amazing of him. Let me just try and, because obviously the videos weren't as clear as one would have liked them to have been. So let me just try and fill in a few gaps, Sammy, if I may.
Of course.
Firstly, as you said, the terrorists came to the police station. They managed to get inside. They obviously killed policemen inside. The policemen that were alive managed to make it onto the roof, which is where the gunfire was coming from. It's also important to point out the people the off-duty policemen who he showed you being killed when they came in their cars. There's a rule in Sderot that if the alarms go off because of rockets, any off-duty policeman should just come to the police station, and obviously they get given different missions. And obviously what perhaps he didn't have a chance to explain to you was at that time of the morning, no one actually knew the terrorists were there. So the policemen were driving in their own civilian cars to the stations. And as I say, all 3 cases they showed you where they got shot, the policemen didn't know what was coming. So that's something to point out as well. Also, just to explain as well, because he obviously wasn't totally able to explain this, how did the situation finish? It finished that eventually when the SWAT teams came to the police station, they tried to recapture the police station. Now, that wasn't going to be possible because every time they tried to do that, more policemen were killed. So what they did eventually was the fire brigade sent I suppose you would call it a platform. The SWAT team went up on the platform and they managed to get down the 7 live policemen who were still on the roof. And by the way, all this is going on while still under fire. Once they'd got them all down, that's when the decision was made to destroy the police station, which involved a tank coming into Sderot, which again, if you could just picture the concept of a tank needing to go down the high street in Glasgow, you can understand what an alien concept that is. And then having to fire on the Glasgow police station is just something you couldn't comprehend. So they bought a tank and a helicopter, and that's what destroyed the police station. And obviously all the terrorist bodies, together with the dead policemen, were obviously within the rubble. So that's really the story. The other thing, which you might have seen on the video, and again, it was on the second video, but because you couldn't really hear the sounds, you missed out on a remarkable story, which I think would be too good not to tell. There's a bit of a thing amongst people in Sderot, families in Sderot, that as soon as they hear the first rocket attack, there's many of them will just pack up their children, pack up a bag, and decide to go and stay with friends and relatives in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem or Netanya, wherever it may be. And there was a family called the Swisser family, and they went, which was a mother and a father and 2 little girls. And they went to do exactly that thing. They made it to the entrance of Sderot. And there was actually, you can see there's another video which I haven't got, where literally they're going one way. There's a terrorist white Jeep going the other way. And the terrorists didn't even notice them. And then in what is a remarkably tragic circumstance, the alarms went off. So the father stops the car, and instead of being able to drive out of Sderot and making it alive, he stops his car, he grabs one of the girls to take her to a bomb shelter. At that point, the terrorists see her. They kill the father. And obviously the mother and the 2 daughters are still alive. Along comes an off-duty policeman in his white car, which is the white car you'd have seen at the end of that video. And he said to a civilian who was just passing by, he said, do me a favor. The mother's hysterical. Obviously, she's just seen her husband's been shot. Please drive the mother in her car with the 2 little girls and drive them to the police station. Just follow me, because the police station will be the safest place in the whole town.
Yeah.
And what you saw, obviously, when that car turned up, obviously the policeman was shot instantly in his white car. The mother and the helpful passerby were shot instantly and killed in the black car. And the 2 girls were under a blanket. And the terrorists, despite checking inside the car twice, and I've watched the videos, they go and check, they still don't see the girls under the blanket. And it's that second video, Sammy, and I really hope, obviously, I know it didn't come out so well. I really hope maybe by WhatsApp you can send it to everyone who's on this Zoom now that they understand what happened. And as I say, eventually, as you can see with the body cam, policemen came and they managed to pull the girls out. And also for those of your listeners, if we can call them that, or viewers who speak Hebrew, when you hear the exchange between the older sister and the policeman, it's a remarkable exchange, because she's shouting out the window, and as the policemen come closer to the car, she shouts at them, are you Israel? Are you the Israeli army? Because she's thinking they could be terrorists. And they obviously said yes. And then she said, and again, it showed a remarkable maturity for this little girl. She said, I've got a baby in the car with me, because there's a very good chance if she hadn't said that, they would have taken the older girl and left the younger girl under a blanket, and they would never have seen her. I can tell you now about that family. Obviously, the mother and father, as we said, were both killed. I can tell you that the 2 little girls are now staying with an auntie and a grandparent who have obviously been evacuated from Sderot. So it sort of had some sort of happy ending that the 2 girls made it, but obviously without their parents, unfortunately.
I'll check the video, and we'll have a list of all the people who have logged into the Zoom, and we'll be able to send it out.
Yeah, I think it's a video that it's a really, really powerful video, and it's a shame, obviously. In terms of the numbers, which you were asking, Elad, just to put it clearly, there were about 27, 28 terrorists who made it to the police station. Bearing in mind there were only 8 policemen on duty. Remember, it's not a big town. It's not a particularly high crime area. It's a Shabbat, so again they're probably going to go with a skeleton staff, and obviously they had no chance against 20 terrorists turning up with Kalashnikovs, RPGs, grenades, and everything else. I think, but I can tell you, the efforts of the police here were absolutely amazing. We lost 11 policemen here, which included 8 local policemen plus 3 from the SWAT teams. And I've got to tell you, obviously, I'm sitting here with my wife. Her mother works at the police station, if she doesn't mind me saying. Thank God she doesn't work on Shabbat. Her mother works there. She has a cousin, Uri, who is a policeman. He was off duty, and he, like everyone else, came into work. And the reason that he's still alive today, Sammy, is for one reason and one reason alone. He said that 99% of the time when he would come into work, he would come on the same road that you saw there where the policemen were literally getting slaughtered as they turned up. Something in his mind, and he said he still doesn't know what it was, made him go around the back of the police station, and hence they didn't see him. And he didn't even have a gun on him. So, you know, I think that's the thing that people maybe on the Zoom sort of really want to get across, is that Sderot, it's not such a small town. It's not a village. It's a town of 36,000 people, but everyone knows each other. And if they don't know each other, they know one person who knows that next person. And so to lose 50 residents on one day is obviously a massive, massive blow to the town. What Elad didn't have a chance to explain is that there was fighting in 2 other areas. There was fighting in the shopping, outside the shopping mall. There was fighting in the north of the town where a soldier was killed, and obviously there were many civilians who were just literally gunned down on the streets. Now again, if just to give you another example of how close it was and how personal it all is. As I say, we were staying at my mother-in-law's on the Friday night. One of Tamar's brothers, well, a number of her brothers are very religious, but she's got one very religious brother. Despite all the rocket attacks, he went off to synagogue as normal. He said, "I'm not going to be stopped from going to synagogue." And obviously, he goes off to synagogue at 7 o'clock in the morning, obviously with no phone, because, as I say, he's very orthodox. And we heard nothing from him till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And yeah, and my wife's just saying to me now, we thought he was dead, because where his synagogue is exactly the areas where the terrorists gunned down the old age pensioners that I'm sure you've heard about. It was right exactly in that area until 2 o'clock.
Sorry, not everybody will know about the old age pensioners, Clive.
Okay, so the old age pensioners, there was a group of, I keep saying the word old age pensioners. There was a group of old age pensioners who obviously not religious, who were going on a day trip, I believe, to the Dead Sea. And their minibus pulled over at a bus stop because I think they had a punctured tire. And obviously the terrorists saw them there, and they literally gunned down every single one of them. And as I say, it was all 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds, and they killed a lot of them, just stood by the bus stop as the person was trying to change the tire.
I think the point is that they weren't from Sderot themselves. They
Correct.
were somewhere else.
Correct.
In Sderot. They were allowed to stop there.
They stopped, as I say. I think they had a problem with their minibus. I think they had a punctured tire.
Yeah.
And as I say, they stopped, and as I say, every single one of them was killed. So literally, as I say, Sammy, all round the town, people were killed. I've met, as I say, because I've been doing a lot of work with the municipality, and groups are coming, and sometimes I introduce them to the people that have been affected, Sammy. It's everywhere through Sderot. I'll give you another, and as I say, I hope my wife doesn't mind me mentioning these things, but There's a running group in Sderot. There's a WhatsApp group which I joined. I don't really participate much in the conversation, but it's a jogging group for people that go jogging. And 4 of them went out on the Shabbat morning to go jogging. They got caught by the rockets. They survived the rockets. They then got saved by some paratroopers who came to save them. And then the paratroopers themselves were attacked, and only one of the 4 joggers made it back to Sderot, and the other 3 were killed. And as I say, it's a very popular WhatsApp group and as I say, I'm on that group, and it's just every corner you turn, Sammy, every corner, there's someone else. And again, I hope my wife does. I'm not going to give you any names here, Sam. Okay, so no names here, Sammy.
No names.
When we were in Netanya, they set up we went to, just to explain that most people were evacuated from Sderot who wanted to go. We left on the Wednesday following the Shabbat. Most people went to hotels paid for by the government. A friend of ours offered us an empty apartment in Netanya, and we went down the route of doing that. We just thought we'd prefer that. Anyway, a lot of children from Sderot were moved to Netanya. So what they did, they set up like a pop-up temporary school. And my wife went to teach in the school every morning. And I remember, Sam, and as I say, this is why everything links to everything, is that one morning I dropped my wife off to go and teach, and she said to me, why don't you come and talk to the kids in English? You can help them with their English a little bit. You can talk to them about football. As long as you do it in English, it's educational. So she gave me these 4 boys, and it wasn't easy. I don't think teaching is for me, Sammy. I don't know how teachers do it. And at the end of it, when I finished and I went home with my wife, she said, how was it? And I said, it was okay. I said, there was just one boy that was a little bit disruptive. I couldn't get through to him at all. He was the boy wearing the grey tracksuit. And she said to me, don't you remember I told you about him? And I said, no. She said, he's the boy whose father went out jogging and was shot dead.
No, that's not jogging.
Sorry, not jogging. Sorry, he was on a bike. He wasn't one of the joggers. Because some of them do biking, some of them do jogging. My wife just pointed out he wasn't a jogger. He was a biker.
Right.
There's me trying to teach him English a month after he's lost his father. You know, like, and it just makes you realize it's everyone in the town, Sammy. Somehow it's affected everyone really.
I think worth Clive that. I mean, obviously, Tamar is prodding you and giving you ideas, and that's great. But because Sderot is the biggest sort of town in the area, all the other ones tend to be smaller kibbutzim, but many of them had a large number of their members and their inhabitants killed. But obviously, because Sderot is so large, it had such a huge, I suppose, impression on what happened to everybody living in that town. So, but obviously you were there on the day, and what did you know about what was going on when you were in your own home?
To be totally honest, not a lot, in the sense that, as I say, the rocket started at 6:30 in the morning. Now, I'm told by people that have lived in Sderot all their lives that they've never heard a volume of rockets like the volume on that day. It was something that's never been before. So even religious people, and like I say, many of Tamar's family are very religious. Everyone turned their phones on, their televisions on to understand what was going on. But I'll be honest with you, no one really understood, Sammy. If you had rung me up at 9:30 on the Saturday morning, Sammy, and said, how many terrorists do you think are in Israel? I'd have probably said 60, 80, 100 in the whole. I don't think the volume of what was going on actually was clear at all. You've also got to understand that in Sderot, there were a lot of power cuts in the first day or two. So I think it was the Sunday, we had no electricity for most of the day. So obviously there's no television, there's no internet. You can't charge your phone, and we're all looking at each other's phones to go, what percentage have you got left? And so that didn't help in terms of the information. Also, there were a lot, as will always happen, there's a lot of rumors that go around and people think they've seen a terrorist and it's not a terrorist. There was a lot of misinformation going on. So the answer is we didn't know as much as what we know now. And people say to me, Sammy, like, was it scary? And I say, and I'm not trying to be macho, Sammy. I genuinely wasn't particularly scared, but the reason I wasn't scared was because I didn't know what was going on. If you had said to me, by the way, there's 50 to 60 highly armed terrorists in Sderot running around in different neighborhoods, you can be absolutely certain, Sammy, I'd have been as scared as the next man. But we just didn't know the volume of what was going on.
So to some extent, Clive, there were so many terrorists, it could have been much, much worse with all those terrorists running around the town and finding people who they tried to kill or managed to kill. It could have been so much worse, you would think.
Well, let's put it like this, Sammy. Having seen lots of videos and spoken to lots of people, and as I say, I've been to some of the kibbutzim as well, and I'm happy to give you one little story that I just feel I've got to share from a kibbutz, but let's do that in a minute. Is that there were moments when the terrorists were incredibly incompetent. You know, and I've been told that a lot of the terrorists were very low-level trained. So, for example, the story of the two girls that survived, when you send round the first video, the 5-minute video to your members, they're going to see that twice a terrorist looked in the window of the car to make sure they killed everyone and didn't notice the girls. And that was a piece of incompetence, thank God, that saved their lives. But equally, there were bits where they were very clever and competent. So what they did very well, the terrorists, was they managed to block off a lot of the road junctions in this area. Some of them put on army uniforms, and they actually persuaded people by doing this with their arm to slow down. People slowed down because they thought it was an army checkpoint, and then obviously shot them dead. So to sort of answer your question, if they had managed to kill the police station or kill the police within the police station, they would have had a real open house in terms of being in Sderot, having the roads cut off outside of Sderot. One of the policemen, who's a colleague of the one who came online, whilst he didn't want to give me too many details, he told me that on one of the terrorists, they found a list of 16 targets that they had in Sderot, 16 places that they had identified. And he, as I say, it's not a piece of information they want to share, and he wouldn't tell me what was on it. Obviously, of course, the police station was on it. So yeah, I think it would have been infinitely worse. Again, there's bits of luck, because if it had been 2 hours later, as I say, Simchat Torah is a time when every family goes to synagogue because it's a fun day. It's the funnest day of the year to go to synagogue. So at 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, the streets would have been filled with families and kids. You know, it would have, the fact it was as early as there was meant that nearly everyone was indoors, and most people with the rocket attacks obviously stayed indoors. As I say, we spoke about my brother-in-law who did go out, but most people obviously, so it could have been a lot worse, Sammy, in many ways. I'd love to share with you, Sammy, I know, as I say, we want to get onto the rebuild of Sderot, but I'd love to share with you one story from a kibbutz that I just think is so remarkable. If I hadn't heard and seen it. So anyway, as I said, as you know, Sammy, I've been helping the municipality, particularly obviously speaking mother tongue English, with various groups, etc., that have come. So there was an American film guy who's been doing a project with them, and I had to take him to some of the kibbutzim to film the buildings, and also to interview some of the people in the kibbutzim that had been affected. So we went to kibbutz Kfar Aza, where, as many of you know, most of the young people that were kidnapped came from there. In fact, we all know the tragic story of the 3 hostages who were actually killed by Israeli troops by mistake. 2 of them came from there. In fact, I've seen their bedrooms, if you like. Anyway, we're filming there amongst what I call the young people's apartments. And this woman was nearby. She was a 40-year-old woman, and she lived in the house next door, the young people's apartment. She was like a family woman. And I said, would it be okay if he filmed your house? And she said, yes. And then I said, would it be okay if he interviewed you? And she said, oh, I don't think I could talk about it. But I said, can I take your number? Maybe we'll talk. So I took her number. I rang her back a few days later and she said, okay, if you want to come tomorrow, I don't mind being interviewed. And she didn't really speak much English, so I had to translate it. Now, generally, and again, I'm not in the film world or the TV world, Sam, it's not my world, but generally when you set up an interview, you know what the story is going to be. You've done some research, you know what you're going to hear. We had no idea what she was going to tell us. And she showed us around the house, and the story that I've got to share it. That she's a woman, she's married to her husband, she's got 2 kids, 12 and 14, 1 boy, 1 girl. Anyway, the alarms go off. Her husband, who's an officer in the army in reserve, not a full-time soldier, he instantly went out with his gun to go and, because he's part of the first responder group on the kibbutz, and said to her, you just be in the reinforced room with the kids, obviously still thinking it was just probably a rocket attack at that point. Anyway, they're in the reinforced room, okay, holding the door shut for a long, long time. Then they hear Arab voices in the lounge, right? In their lounge, in their home, she's by herself with her 2 kids. The reinforced room there was the boys' bedroom, typical young boys' bedroom full of footballs, Barcelona shirts, books chucked on the floor. You can imagine what a 12-year-old's room looked like. And in there is a single bed, Sammy, a single bed. And it's one of those old-fashioned beds, or maybe it's a new fashion, where you can tilt the bed up, and within the bed is a hollow where you can put sheets and blankets. They made a decision to get into this hollow of the bed. So you're talking a mother, a 14-year-old girl, and a 12-year-old girl. 14-year-old girl, 12-year-old boy. Now, Sammy, thank God that they obviously must have been a very slim family from the pictures I saw, because this is a single bed. They lay in there on their stomachs within this single bed and obviously pulled the bed down on top of them. They then hear the door open. A terrorist comes in. He lies on the bed. And she said he was on the bed for about 15 minutes. He was messing around with the magazines of his gun and all of this type of thing for 15 minutes. And he never heard them. He never heard them breathing. He never felt them underneath. And to me, I can't, having seen this bedroom, I don't know how you could lie on that bed and not know there's 3 people in the bed. One cough, one noise, anything, and the game's up. He then leaves. They stay in the bed. Then they can smell smoke coming through because the terrorists have now left the home and set fire to it. And she said, we had a decision to make. Are we going to die of suffocation, or are we going to take our chances? So they got out of the bed, went out into the garden area where they could have been shot instantly, Sammy, in a moment. They managed to make it into their garden shed, which also didn't have a lock on. They hid in the garden shed for 9 hours. And then eventually they heard Israeli voices and the army came and saved them. But when you see this bed, Sammy, it's a story. If I hadn't heard it myself, and I'm interviewing this woman, not knowing what she's going to say, and it's truly, I've heard lots of stories, Sammy, but I think for me, and having heard it directly from the woman herself, it's as many people were killed, Sammy. Some of the stories of how people were saved are nothing short of miraculous, Sammy, and that one in particular.
And Clive, which I didn't know, that a lot of these safe rooms are not lockable from the inside. So,
I've got news for you, Sammy. I don't think any of them are lockable from the inside.
Exactly, and I think they had to be in the room and hold the door shut when they tried to get in, and they tried to make sure they couldn't open the door.
Well, I've got to tell you, Sammy, that when we were in Netanya and we were thinking about coming back to Sderot in December, I went online and I bought some device that I saw advertised that you're meant to be able to hook into the thing so holds it. What I can tell you is that's the worst 150 shekels I've ever spent, Sammy, because when I came back to Sderot, it didn't fit the door lock. So you're right, we can't lock our door, because do you know why, Sammy? Because they weren't built for that. They weren't built for terrorist invasions. They were built for rockets. So of course you wouldn't want to lock the door in a rocket, because if I'm in there and then my wife's and I've locked the door, she can't get in. So obviously logic is that's why you wouldn't make it a lockable door. But I think that's something that will obviously now be looked at as they start rebuilding homes, et cetera, Sammy.
And the other thing I'm aware of, that some of these terrorists, they actually set fire to the buildings. So if people were actually hiding in the buildings, they had to come out because the building was on fire.
Well, that happened particularly on the kibbutzim. As I say, I've been to Kibbutz Be'eri, I've been to Kibbutz Kfar Aza with film crews. And yeah, there's a heck of a lot of burn damage, and that's exactly what they did. I believe that what they did as well, they took from all the cars, they took the spare tires, because as we know, if you set light to a tire, it's very hot and it produces a lot of smoke and you couldn't breathe. So yeah, a lot of the people had the choice of either suffocating to death, being burnt to death, or coming out and taking their chances. So yeah, you're right, Sammy. There was nothing pleasant in anything that they did.
I think, Clive, everybody now has a good understanding of what happened on the day, but I'd like to turn to you and what you're doing in Sderot, and the story of how you met the mayor, and the mayor asked you to help the young kids, and what you're doing in that area, so people understand what you're doing there.
No, I would very much. I think that would be very good. So anyway, as we said, I moved to Sderot in May 2022. The town has got a very popular mayor, a mayor who, from people who, as I say, have lived here a lot longer than me, say that if you see what the town was like and what it's become, he's taken the town a long way forward. And he's also a bit like me, it seems, that he can't start the day unless he's done a run or he's done some exercise. So I used to see him at the gym all the time. We were on a sort of a half smile, nodding acquaintance, just because that's what you do in the gym when you walk past someone. But I'd never actually spoken to him. And then it was on the afternoon of pre-Yom Kippur of September or October 2022. We were walking sort of down the same aisle in the supermarket, and it was just like, well, if we didn't say hello now, it'd almost be rude not to, because like you sort of know each other. We got talking. I think obviously I surprised him with an English accent, because you don't get that a lot in Sderot. And knowing me, I probably used a bit of English as well, because that's what sometimes happens. And when I told him a bit about my background, he said, we need to do more to help the kids here with the sport. I'm going to get my head of sport to call you. He took my number, and that's what happened, or I took his number. And I met the head of sport. Now, I'm a massive believer, Sammy, and obviously I know Scotland as well has its health issues with the kids, etc. That, you know, I'm someone who, even at, you know, my age, I try and exercise most days every week. And we all know the benefits of exercise physically and mentally. I was reading today some research that they did in Sderot in 2007. And this was just after, you know, a couple of years of rocket attacks, that 75% of the kids aged between 4 and 18 suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, sleeping problems, anxiety. The obesity rates amongst children in Sderot are far higher than other places in the country. And this has all been linked down to basically what they've been through. You know, even the mayor, I was with him the other day, and he was speaking to a group of people. And he's got a 25-year-old daughter who, funny enough, I've worked a little bit with her on a couple of projects. She's an incredibly well put together young lady. But he said, we've done the maths. In her lifetime, she's had to run to the bomb shelter 20,000 times in her lifetime growing up. That's the maths they've done. But that's not normal, is it? That's going to have an effect on you. And you've also got to remember, the situation is better now than it was, because at least we've got the warning system, and we've got the Kipput Bazel, which in English is an iron dome system, which takes down most of the rockets. And I do stress most of the rockets and not all of the rockets. So you can only imagine what effect that all has on a kid. That's got to have an effect. And I see it as well. I'm heavily involved with the soccer in particular for the kids. We've got about 300 kids who do soccer through the municipality in 3 different sort of streams, if you like. And I see it, the fitness and as I say, there's weight issues with quite a high percentage of them, behavioral issues, anxiety, and all these things. And by the way, everything I'm telling you, Sammy, is before the 7th of October. So if there was a problem before the 7th of October, you can be certain there's a problem now. Even these few months as well, with the kids being in the hotel, it's given that they've lacked any sort of structure, even though there's bits of education. A lot of them are not going. The parents aren't even getting to them. They've had no sport. They've had no exercise. They've had nothing to get out of bed for in the morning. So whatever problems there were before the 7th of October, you can be absolutely certain are going to be infinitely worse when we come back. And the problem with Sderot, let's say compared to Herzliya and Netanya and other places that we all know, is that from a socio-economic perspective, things are not great. It's not a place where there's lots of wealthy people. And it means that the budgets that come in from the money that the parents pay, etc., is never really enough. And in the time I've been involved, which has been about, let's say it's a year and a bit, a year and a half, I have constant battles because I go to the head of sport and we have a weekly meeting, and particularly regarding the soccer. And I'll say to him, if we want to help the kids, we need to do A, B, and C. And he'll go, Clive, that's a brilliant idea. A, B, and C, they're all good. In fact, he's never once yet told me I've had a bad idea, although I'm sure that will happen as well sometime. But he said, but the problem is, Clive, there's no money for it. You're right. We need to do these things. Even beyond the soccer, let me give you another example of something that we're doing. But again, the funding is a problem. Is that, again, I hope my wife doesn't mind me mentioning it. I'm going to mention it anyway and take my chances. When we went to Netanya, my wife said to me, I want to do Krav Maga, which is, you know, the self-defense system. It's a far easier system to learn. It was actually invented in Israel. She says, not even just so much for the physical exercise, more for her own self-confidence, having been through what we've been through. And I managed to find a class, and she went to 9 lessons when we were there, and she loved it. She loved the activity. She loved the people. And when we came back to Sderot in December, I went to the head of sport and I said to him, I've got an idea. Let's bring Krav Maga to Sderot. I've been in touch with 1 or 2 teachers who could come and set up classes here every night. And we've signed an agreement and we're going to do it. The problem is there's going to be many, many parents who can't afford to send their kids to it, because obviously you've got to pay for the equipment, you've got to pay the instructors, etc., etc., etc. And we want to make sure. And by the way, it's not just the kids, because by the way, my wife will do it. I'm sure my sister-in-laws will do it. This is something for the adults as well, because everyone's confidence has been knocked a little bit. And again, we want to create a situation where everybody in Sderot can afford to go and do these things, particularly the kids, and that, you know, no one is not doing it because they can't afford to do it. So that's why, Sammy, we've been on, since October, we've been on, for the sports department, we've been on a massive fundraising sort of push. Even though, to be honest, I actually said to the mayor and I said to the head of sport when I first get involved, I'll bring you all my knowledge of professional sport, amateur sport, everything I've ever been involved in. The one thing I won't get involved in is fundraising, because I don't like it. I don't want to ask. It's not for me, I said to them. And then obviously 7th of October happened, and the head of sport said to me, I know you always said you didn't want to, but would you not agree in these difficult times that perhaps we've all got to do things we don't want to do? And obviously I found myself sat in Netanya in this apartment with very little to do each day. And I said, right, do you know what? Let's do it. And that's what I've been doing now, Sammy, since, well, basically about the 15th of October, probably. So for 3.5 months. just trying to raise more and more funds. So when the kids come back, not only will they have as good as what the kids in Tel Aviv or even the kids in Glasgow get, I want them to have better than what they get, because I think the kids here probably deserve, how do I put it, to get the best for once, rather than the 20 years of what they've had to put up with.
So when we first spoke about having this Zoom, Clive, one of the ideas we discussed, I was going to ask you what people in the UK or in Scotland can maybe do to help your appeal. And I know you've sent me a link to.
So I think two things they can do. One is to do with the appeal. One is to do with what they can do in general to help here. The one thing everyone on this call can do, and it doesn't cost any money at all, is just to get the word out there of what actually happened here, because we all know that the media, particularly the BBC, you know, that they've got nothing good to say about what Israel has done. So I think the first thing everyone can do, and as I say, that costs no money at all, is to make sure that they speak to the people in their circle, particularly, dare I say, in their non-Jewish circle, to try and get across the truth of what actually happened here. And that's not to be naive, and that's not, of course, civilians have been killed in Gaza, of course they have, but civilians were killed in the Second World War, civilians were killed in the First World War. That's what happens when you know, so no one's denying that, and no one's saying that one wants to see Palestinian babies in rubble either. No one wants that either. But I just think anyone who's watching the news in England and thinks that Israel has got any alternative but to do what it's doing now, which is to try and destroy the Hamas, not to give them a couple of slaps around the face and say don't do it again, because that ship has sailed. You can't come into a country and kill 1,200 people and kill them in the most brutal ways that I've not even discussed on this Zoom, and I've heard things that I wouldn't tell you on this Zoom, and kidnap 250 people and expect Israel just to say, well, I'll tell you what, we'll launch rockets into Gaza for a day or two and call it quits, because that was never going to happen. So that's the first thing everyone can do. And if there's anyone who wants to contact me for more information on that, although I'm sure there's plenty out there, I'll be very happy to give them more information. Anyway, that's the bit they can do for nothing. Regarding the kids, what we did very early on in October, well, when we started getting into it, we got in touch with a very well-known UK charity called My Israel. My Israel was set up by a lady called Danny Franks, who moved to Israel. And she basically has gone around Israel picking the small charities, the forgotten things, not the ones we all know, like Magen David Adom, which, by the way, do amazing work, not the big ones, the small ones. And I got in touch with her and I said to her, I'm not asking you to give any money. I said, but I need a platform, because people in England like to give to a UK registered charity. As we all know, of course, that has tax benefits for those people who pay income tax, of course. And, you know, you're a really trusted organization. Would you help us? And they did a lot of due diligence. They didn't say yes straight away. And she came back and said, right, we will set you up this link. And so you just send this link to people, we collect the money and we send it on to you. But she actually did more than that. She came down with 3 or 4 of her people to Sderot. She met the mayor. She met the head of sport, and she asked some pretty tough questions, by the way. It was quite a grilling. I was in that meeting. And they're so impressed with what's going on here. They're actually going to donate money from their general war fund to help a couple of the projects here as well, which was far beyond anything I dreamt they were going to do. I just thought they were going to act as a platform for us. So we've got, as I say, there's a link that you've got, Sammy, which is through the My Israel. You click on the link to make sure it goes to our page, so it comes to us. And you know what? I don't care how little, you know, whether someone gives £5, £10, 50, it doesn't matter, because in the end, it'll all add up. One thing we also do for those who want it, to people that donate, we're able to send out sort of regular emails that just for those who want it, that gives them an update of what's actually been done and what's actually happening. So it doesn't just sort of go down a sort of a charity black hole, so to speak.
So we've actually run a couple of appeals. Glasgow Friends of Israel and my wife Vicky has run a couple of appeals, and I think what we'd like to do, Vicky has volunteered that she's going to start this appeal in order to try and help you and what you're trying to do. So it would be, I've got your link, but I'd also like to talk to the girl that you mentioned, and we'll see where we can take it from there. And we'll let everybody on this call and everybody else that we know send the information, and they'll be able to, if they want to, donate directly to your appeal. Now, it's called My Israel, you said, but they've got a special page. Yeah.
Right. If you click on that link, if anyone clicks on the link I send you, it opens directly to the page. It's got some more information, and as I say, anyone who's a UK taxpayer, it has all the benefits that
I think Edward's going to put the name of the link onto the chat if people want to. We'll this forward and try and start it. Now, I'm conscious that I've been speaking to you and I've been hogging you for the last hour and a quarter, and I'm sure there are lots of people who've got questions they'd like to ask you. So what I'd like to do is, because there were other things I was going to discuss with you, but I think we've covered so much ground and it's been so interesting, but I think it's good to give other people a chance to ask a question. So if anybody wants to put their hand up and ask a question, and we'll get Edward to unmute them and give them a chance to ask your question.
Yeah, can I just butt in at this point and point out that the link is already in the chat. Just need to click on the link to donate to the charity to help the children of Sderot.
Okay, so any hands going up? Let's keep an eye on it. There's one from, all I can see is his hand going up and his glasses. So 44798 is under Edward. Can you see him?
Oh, I can't see him just now, but I think that might be Raymond. I saw him earlier. I shall unmute.
Okay. Okay, who's been unmuted so they can ask a question? There's quite a few.
So 44798, is it Raymond?
Yes, it is Ray.
Hi, Ray.
That's my Zoom prison number.
Oh, no wonder we didn't recognize you. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much, Clive, for an absolutely wonderful chat. Shame about the circumstances. 2 questions. One, how many people have returned to Sderot out of the 36,000? And 2, just today I read about there being a massive increase in civilians in Israel taking out gun licenses. The government's actually encouraging them to do this to defend themselves. What is the situation like regarding this in Sderot?
Okay, so let me deal with the first question. So the population of Sderot is roughly 36,000. They can only estimate how many people are back, and I've not heard the estimations this week. And it was funny, I was in the municipality and I said to one of the guys, every time the mayor comes out or the spokesman says, we think there's this many people back or that many people back, I said, how do you actually know? Because I couldn't figure out how they think they know. And the answer is they know by the water usage, which homes are using water. So there we are, there's something we've all learned this week. I would say at the moment, there's probably, it wouldn't surprise me if there's 10 to 12,000 people back. I've spoken to more and more people, or my wife has as well, that are coming back. There's some people who are sort of coming back for the weekends, if you like, just to A, see their home, B, to try and get the kids used to it. The problem for people coming back, even if you ignore the safety issues, is that there's no school on here, of course. There's no, as we've discussed, we can't do any sports here for the kids or anything like that. So the ones who are, should we say, are going to be the last to come back are what I'm going to call the young families with kids of that age that need to be out and about at school and doing things. So I'm going to say probably at the moment, it wouldn't surprise me if it's 10 to 12,000 out the 36. But as I say, it sort of ebbs and flows a little bit. In answer to your second question, when I first moved to Sderot, I actually went online and I thought, I wonder if I would be eligible for a gun license. I'm not really sure I was ever going to do it, but I had a look, bearing in mind, obviously, that to the very best of my knowledge, I've got no criminal record. Obviously, I was in the army in infantry, so one has that on my side. And it came up as a no, which, as I say, I wasn't that bothered. Literally on about the 10th of October, I'm going to say, or the 9th or 10th of October, the government announced that Sderot was now going to be an area that geographically entitled you to a gun. I applied for a gun. I mean, my mom's on this Zoom. She doesn't even like me calling it a gun. It upsets her too much. I won't. So we have a sort of a code word for it. Yes. Thank you, Mum. But I've got it. So in answer to your question, I can tell you this, is that when there was a newspaper article last week that said there had been 290,000 applicants. And by the way, this is new applications. This is people that don't already have a gun, of course. 290,000 applications since the 7th of October. I mean, they're struggling to deal with all the applications. I can tell you that when I had a friend of mine who pulled a few strings to get my application dealt with quicker. I then had to pay the license fee. I went down to the local shooting range in Netanya to do the course that you have to do to then complete the license. And they said to me, come back in 2 weeks' time. I then started sort of crying, not crying literally, but moaning and saying, well, I live in Sderot. I need to go back. And so they said, okay, come tomorrow. So I was able to fast track mine. And yeah, I've got a gun now and take it with me probably 90% of the time. I can see in general, there's far more guns in Sderot than what there were before the 7th of October. And yeah, I think Israel's now going to be, for the foreseeable future, a country where most or a very high percentage of men, let's say aged between 20 and 70. And by the way, there's women as well, just to clarify that, although it's mainly men, that will have guns now. I just don't think people want to be in that situation like we were, where you're in the apartment, you're looking for the biggest knife in the kitchen, and that's your best hope. So yeah, the numbers are massive, to answer your question.
So Daraba. And by the way, your English is not too bad. I can understand it.
And you're in Scotland as well.
Coming from a Scotsman, I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you.
There's a gentleman with a brown shirt, I think, who's got his hand up. There's no name. It just says iPhone. Can you see that, Edward?
Yes, the iPhone. Yes, I shall
unmute him.
unmute. There we go.
Okay.
Hi.
Yes.
Hi, Clive. That was very, very interesting. My name's Colin Grant, by the way. Hi. And I'm watching this for two reasons. One is because I'm fascinated to hear your story. But secondly, I also cover Scotland for a newspaper called the Jewish Telegraph. And I intend to write about this Zoom call in the paper this week. And this question is not really relevant to what I'm going to write, but it's something I'm very, very curious about. And as are a lot of people I've spoken to. And it is this. Basically, Israel has always been known to have a very, very good intelligence system and a defense system. So how come all these people managed to get across the border and carry out these terrible atrocities for so long without any reaction and without any knowledge in advance? This is the question that everybody I speak to, and these are people who support Israel and who don't support Israel, they're all talking about this. And I just wonder if you had, and I don't mean that you would necessarily have an insight, but
I think, listen, I think a few things. I think firstly, I have a friend of mine who's nothing to do with the army, who I do a bit of work here. And for months, he's been telling me something's going to happen, something's going to happen. There were people saying things were going to happen. I've seen interviews on TV here particularly with some of the, when I say the young girls, the girls of 20, 21 or whatever, who are the ones who sit in front of the screens on the, on the border, watching for movement and reporting everything in. And they're saying that they pass things up the food chain, saying we're seeing things that don't look ordinary here, that don't look right. And for whatever reason, they were ignored. Beyond that, and I've seen a very interesting Washington Post video on this. You can probably find it. When you actually break it down and go, well, how did they get past the cameras? How did they get past the remote control guns? How did they get past? It's like anything in life, any big project, if you break it down into small, manageable parts, it's quite, and we saw that in 9/11. How did you honestly think a few guys with penknives are going to take down 4 planes? But actually, sometimes, you break these things down and yes, something has gone horribly, horribly wrong. A friend of mine is in the army, and he's told me some horrific statistics. He said that on the border of the Gaza border, for every 50 terrorists, there was 1 infantryman. That was the ratio on the morning. There were 6 tanks on the whole. Now, obviously, it's a weekend, and I was in the army, and you wanted to get home for the weekend, but not at the expense. It shouldn't have been at the expense of obviously security. And things went really, really badly wrong. I can't fathom how it happened. And there's going to be a lot of finger pointing. There's going to be a lot of people blaming everyone else. And I cannot get my head around how they just, and the other thing as well is that Israel put literally billions of shekels into dealing with the tunnels, because it was always suspected that would be their way into Israel, through the tunnels. To the best of my knowledge, and I've not heard any different, not 1 terrorist came into Israel through a tunnel. They just walked in through the fence that they pulled down, basically, So no, Colin, I could talk for 20 minutes and I'd just go round in circles. It's just an absolute, I can't, no one can explain, as I say, it just looked too impossible to do, and they made it look so simple.
I'd like to maybe just say 2 things, Clive. It was the attack was exactly 50 years after the Yom Kippur War, within a day. And the same debacle happened on Yom Kippur, when it was a Shabbat, and it was a Chag, Yom Kippur. When most of the army soldiers go home, that's what happens. And the same happened here. It was a Shabbat, and it was Simchat Torah, and a lot of soldiers were allowed to go home and leave, and only skeleton soldiers were left, as you suggest. The other thing that I think has been happening for the last 2 or 3 years is that Israel has focused more on the West Bank, that it has focused on Gaza. I think they believed that they had Hamas under control. They were having sort of relations with them, and they were talking to them, and they were doing things with them. And a lot of the forces that would normally be on Gaza were transferred to deal with problems in the West Bank. And I think that was another reason why they got through so quickly. And they demolished, as we saw in the video, they demolished that fence with bulldozers as if they weren't there, and they just walked through or drove through or rode motorbikes through. It was
one thing I do know, which probably backs up what you're saying, Sammy, there's an army unit, I believe it was the Maglan army unit, who were one of the elite commando units. And there was about 100 soldiers who were sort of kept as I suppose, a reactionary force, and the high commands will move them about as to where they think they need to be. And I've understood that a day or 2 before, they moved them from being by Gaza to move them to the West Bank. For whatever reason, I don't know. And dare I say, if that 100 or so, or it was 120 very, very elite, highly trained soldiers had been in the area, I think, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying something would have happened. Of course it would, but I think I think we would have been far better, you know, the results would have been better from our side. So you're right. There was not enough soldiers and the right type of soldiers on the Gaza border.
Thank you. Anybody else putting their hand up for a question? Please don't be shy. There's a hand. I noticed a hand, but I missed who it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Katrina. Just a moment. Da-da-da-da. I don't see her now. Katrina Mackenzie, here we are. So unmute, please, and
Ask the question in a minute. So we'll go Katrina and then Jean afterwards.
okay.
Thank you. My name's Katrina Mackenzie. Clive, that was fascinating insight into what's going on in Israel, and very sad to hear, you know, real stories like that. I'm not Jewish, but very pro-Israel, and I've read a lot about the history of Israel, but it's very difficult when you're just in normal society in the UK at the moment with, you know, the extreme pro-Palestine message coming across from so many people, the media, the BBC you mentioned, which I think is very, very biased. And you know, you hear a lot of conversations going on, and I'm amazed at the ignorance around the history of Israel. What do you think you know, somebody like me, I'm not Jewish, but very pro-Israel. When you hear things like this going on, what do you think are the best things to say to people to try and educate them?
Well, I think again, and I'm not any great historical expert, but let's even look at the concept of the Palestinian refugees, right? And again, we're going to get a bit historical and a bit boring for 30 seconds if people can bear with me. When it was agreed that there was going to be a two-state solution, which is what everyone keeps talking about, in 1947. If you look at the map of what was offered, Israel, to be honest, was getting the poorer end of the deal. Israel said yes to it. And what happened on that period of time is that 5 Arab countries invaded Israel. They told the Palestinian population, move aside, let us win this war. 700,000 Palestinians were displaced. And how can I put it? They backed the wrong horse. I can't put it any other way. That in the end, Israel won the war. By the way, many Palestinians then took Israeli citizenship, and that's something that needs to be reminded. There's 1.5 or so, that's not an exact number, citizens of Israel who are Arab Muslims. Some of them play football for the Israeli national team. Some of them are high court judges. Nearly every time you go into a pharmacy in Israel, it will be a Muslim Israeli pharmacist, many of the doctors, and so on and so forth. So many of them thought, right, I'll be a part of that. The ones who didn't, they're the ones who chose to effectively turn themselves into refugees. That's the truth of it. And, you know, they've been the most funded refugees in the world, the amount of money that's been pumped into them. And even, for example, in 2005, Israel unilaterally left Gaza. That wasn't a negotiated deal. We left of our own accord, okay? And by the way, if anyone's, and in fact, my mother-in-law, because obviously there were Jewish people that used to live in Gaza before 2005 in villages and kibbutzim or whatever. And I know my mother-in-law used to go fruit and vegetable shopping there and said, you know, it was great. Used to get great stuff and all. Gaza could have been the Singapore or the Dubai of the Middle East when Israel left there in 2005. They could have turned that into they could have done a million different things. They had more money than they knew what to do with. Most of the money was stolen by their leaders. I mean, Abu Mazen is probably worth not far less than Bill Gates. And he's never had a proper job in his life. So how's he worth all that money? And you know, it's that famous expression I think they used to say about Yasser Arafat, is that he never used to miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. So Israel has agreed to two-state solutions in the past. Obviously now it can't and it won't do in the foreseeable future, because even the most left-wing Israeli has realized these are not people at the moment you could consider making peace and concessions to. So the peace process has gone back a million years. But I'd also say this, Katrina, you can't reason with an anti-Semite. So if someone wants to just not like Israel because they're anti-Semitic, that's not an argument you'll ever win, in my opinion. But there are people who are genuinely good people who have taken the side against Israel because they haven't really got the facts. And I think if they knew more, they would actually take a far nicer view of sort of Israel, really, if that's a very long answer to your question, Katerina.
But it's not really long enough, Clive. There's so much more you could say. But I'll get in touch with you, Katrina, and send you some stuff you might want to look at. Could we unmute Jean next, please?
Certainly, and then Ian will be next. Jean, you're unmuted.
Jean, you have to unmute yourself, Jean. Unmute yourself too, Jean. Jean, okay.
Hello, Clive.
Hello,
Thank
Jean.
you. Thank you so much. What a wonderful story we've heard tonight. Now, my concern is, like Katrina, I'm not Jewish, and I have been concerned about how this happened. How did these terrorists manage to get into Israel? What I do recall is not long beforehand, large numbers of Israeli people were on the streets. We had it on our news, protesting the judicial review. Now, my concern is, did Israel take their eye off the ball?
I think there's no doubt that Hamas saw us fighting amongst ourselves. I mean, not that I was personally involved in that and you know, the whole reform stuff. But yeah, no, I think you're right. If you see people fighting amongst themselves, what a great opportunity to take advantage. So there's, you know, bearing in mind, for example, there were times when many Air Force reservists were refusing to go and do their reserve duty and do their training, etc., etc., etc. So yeah, no, I've got no doubt, and I don't think anyone has got any doubt that our internal squabbles have made it, you know, have opened the door for them to go, this is a good time to go and do it. The one thing I will say to try and put, you know, a bit of light on it, Jean, is that, you know, people have come together in a way that you wouldn't, you know, from the left wing non-religious all the way through to the right wing very religious. You know, let's hope that the level of unity in Israel is higher than it has been. Let's hope that, you know, we don't all forget that the minute the whole thing finishes and people go. But I'm sure, regrettably, you know, we will go back to those squabbles. But the squabbles are mainly at the top end. It's the politicians at the top end. And we all know what politicians are like. They all want to hold on for dear life. And regrettably, yeah, there will be problems when this all finishes.
Right. Thank you.
So Ian's
thank you, Jean. Ian Wise.
He's a neighbour of yours, Clive. He lives in Rehovot.
Oh, okay.
He asks you the question.
It's not really a question. I just want to follow on with your comments, if I can, which were given an excellent evening's entertainment. It's been very, very nice. Thank you so much. You were asking previously about the how come they had such an easy time getting through the fence and across the border, and almost 3,000 terrorists and Gazans came through and went into our towns, villages, and kibbutzim. The whole point was they put us to sleep. quite seriously. They put us to sleep. The warning signs were all there. Everybody saw them. But then there was the case that the Arabs were they were sending young kids, and talking very young kids and teenagers, from up to the point of let's say 4 months ago they would send them 100 meters from the fence. Then 3 months ago they would send them 10 meters from the fence, and they kept seeing how far they could come close to Israel's border with the Gaza, to the fence. And Israel, and the soldiers on that border had orders to fire because there was a free fire zone of, let's say, 200-300 meters. If anybody crossed it, went into it, they could be shot. But then the order came out, don't shoot, because world opinion would be against Israel if they're shooting young kids, trying, just seeing how much they could take liberties with Israel's attitude towards people coming to the fence. That's one thing. And then that combined with the whole concept that the Israeli politicians and military had, high military had, with saying that if we keep being nice to the Hamas and the Gaza, we give them $30 million every month, allow in $30 million in cash from Qatar to pay the wages. And if we allow them to have more workers coming in from Gaza to Israel every day, then they will be happier, their economy will improve, and the people will be less wanting to make war with us. But our concept of such a method was totally wrong. It doesn't, the whole basic concept of Hamas, and it's written in the charter, is very simply destroy Israel. It is impossible, as far as they're concerned, that Israel can exist. They are changing the history between the Palestinians and the Hamas. They are totally changing the history of the place. They're changing details, dates, happenings. Jerusalem never mentioned in the Quran. That's their holiest city, which is totally untrue. But the whole concept of how we treated them was the concept of the Western mind, not the concept and how they see us through their Muslim mind, through their Muslim way of thinking. I think as Golda Meir once said, if the Arabs, the Muslims will learn to love life as we do and not love death as they do, it would be a wonderful world for us. And just one other small point I wanted to make regarding refugees. There are two commissions in the UN for refugees. One is the High Commission for Refugees, which has totally the whole world's refugees, except for the Palestinian refugees. The difference between them is the UNRWA looks after only the Palestinian refugees who, I can't remember my English, in the thoughts, let me say, the High Commission for Refugees, you're a refugee, and then you're not a refugee once you've lost your status, and your kids cannot become refugees. In UNRWA, the Palestinian Refugee Association, the great-grandfather was a refugee in 1949. The great-great-grandfather was also, if he was young, the grandfather, the father, and the son. The status of refugee is passed down now from generation to generation to generation for the past 80 years. It's the most ridiculous situation. And I worked in Jordan for a time, and I used to go every day to the border, and the Jordanian driver would pick me up and take me to Irbid, to a factory there. And this guy, he had 3 taxis. He had orange grove, he had a farm, and he had a good life because he was also a refugee. And he used to go every week, every month, he get his big sack of flour, his big sack of rice, and his bottles of oil. Officially, refugee. That's what I have
Thanks.
to say.
Yeah, I would say two things, just to go back to Golda Meir's statement. What she said was that we'll only have peace when the Arabs learn to love their children more than they hate us.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
you mean she also said that?
anyway, and the other thing about UNRWA, if you think about UNRWA, which is what Ian spoke about, if they settle all the refugees, they won't have any work to do. They won't have a job. So what? There's no incentive for the people working for UNRWA to settle all the refugees because they'll be finished. So that's why they're going to propagate and extend their life as long as they can. I don't know if we've got any more questions. It's 9:15. Is anybody looking to ask a question? Edward, can you see anyone?
Yeah, there's a question in the chat from Rachel.
Okay.
Saying, does Israel still rely on USA for ammunition? Don't they need to supply their own soon? Also, is there much open to visit at the moment as a tourist or a volunteer? She says, I was in Netanya in 2014 during the Gaza war, visited Haifa, but not the south. So a couple of questions. Is Israel relying on USA for ammunition? And is there much open to visit as a tourist or a volunteer?
I think on the first point, listen, it's no secret that Israel gets help from America. By the way, I don't know the Iron Dome, which we discussed before. It's the rocket system that intercepts the rockets. I've heard various prices of how much just one intercepting rocket is, and they're not cheap. So, and we've God only knows how many we've had to fire since the 7th of October. So yeah, I think we all know Israel gets support with its defense from America. Regarding your second question, which maybe, dare I say, is one I could answer with greater knowledge and authority, is that there are lots of groups coming to Israel. There's lots of groups coming to Sderot. I mean, it's constant. If you drive past the police station at any time of the day before it gets dark, you'll see a bus and you'll see a group of people, which could be Israelis, it could be politicians. I've hosted members of the British House of Lords I've spoken to. We had 7 members of the Australian Parliament. We've had various, obviously, fundraising people. We've had student groups from America. So I've got to tell you, it's constant, the groups visiting Sderot. I would have said the same about the kibbutzim, although I can tell you now that the visits to the kibbutzim are getting more difficult. The kibbutzim are now at a point where they feel it's enough and they're sort of beginning to close the gates a little bit, which I can totally understand. But no, Sderot, in fact, I spoke to a lady yesterday who's in charge of the tourism. I use the word tourism in Sderot because it's not really tourism in the usual sense. They think there'll be 1 million people will come to Sderot in this year, one way or another, including Israelis who would normally never think of a reason to come and visit. So yeah, in terms of volunteering, there's lots of things. I've got to tell you that when we were in Netanya staying in this very nice apartment block, the residents hired a minibus and I went with them and we went down to a farm near Sderot and we were packing lettuces into plastics and all sorts of things like that. So yeah, there's lots of things people can do if they want to come here, and you know, there's lots of things to visit, and there's lots of things they can help with, really.
I think mentioning, Clive, that because so many people have been called up, a lot of reservists have been called up into the army. We talk about hundreds of thousands. All these people, their jobs are not being done, and many of them come from, you know, farms or from communities that could use a lot of help. A lot of volunteers are going out to actually work in the areas where the people have gone into the army. So there's something in the text Clive from Abigail. Thank you for the talk, Clive. Glad to hear what's going on with you both. Have you any comments about the settler violence? She says.
I'm not.
Please,
I
John.
suppose she means in the West Bank, I'm assuming.
Yes. So yeah, I think so.
To be honest with you, she's obviously, listen, there's always been a little bit of settler violence, but she's obviously better informed than we are here, because there's been very, very little talk of it here on the news. I've got to say,
This is Abigail that's asked this question.
I know, and she's my sister-in-law, and she's generally right. But on this occasion, I'll be honest with you, like, there's not been a lot of talk. There's always bits of trouble, we know that, but I've not heard of there being, you know, should we say, increased trouble on the back of what's going on. So, as I say, she obviously knows something I don't. Well, she knows many things I don't, but I'm saying on this particular matter, she obviously knows something I don't know.
Well, the BBC tends to focus quite a lot on the small amount of settler violence that takes place in the West Bank. People think there's hundreds and thousands of settlers who are shooting and killing people in the West Bank. But of course, we're talking about a very small minority. But when it happens, the BBC is all over it, and B'Tselem is all over it, and all these other anti-Israel organizations that like to publicize that in order to try and make the situation look much worse than it is. Listen, it's 10 to 9. We've had a most wonderful evening with you, Clive. I would like to, on behalf of everybody, thank you, and Tamar, who's been there holding you up, which is great. Hi, Tamar.
Hi.
Hope next time you come to Scotland.
See, my mum, every time you mention Tamar, my mum waves. It's almost like that. I don't want to have my dog again.
We're Scotland, but we didn't meet you, but I hope next time you come to Scotland, we will meet you. So I'd like to thank you so much, Clive, and we will do something with your appeal. Vicky has already started doing something about it and made a donation to it, she tells me. And we will make sure that everybody is aware of it, and we'll try and get information to help people understand exactly what it's about. So on behalf of everyone, what we tend to do, and you can't hear it because if people clap, everybody's muted. You can't hear clapping, but you can see us clapping.
I'll imagine that you're clapping.
No, you can see us clapping. You can see us. Thank you so much, everybody, and thank you, everybody, for being on the call tonight. And I hope you've enjoyed it. And we'll see you for the next one when we have one ready.